Brilliant. I think we're good to go. So thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It is lovely to have you with us. So this is the 8th meeting that we have held. We've been in various villages, and it's been really great to meet everybody and hear everybody's feedback. One of the things that we have heard is that when people are walking into the meetings, they've thought it might be a done deal, and we want to encourage you to and realise that it couldn't be further from the truth. So we have now seen the Lime Down plans. It's a plan to industrialise this area of the Cotswolds for the next 60 years. But it isn't a done deal. This is our moment. This is our moment to have our voice. And the Planning Inspectorate, in fact, really want to hear how it will impact you. What are the harms? What will the impact be on you personally? Because the Planning Inspectorate, they will listen to all those issues, and they will then shape the examination, which will be next year, based on what you and I say. So it is absolutely critical that we use this opportunity to tell them what we think. It's a very straightforward process, and tonight we have a couple of talks for you to explain more. So first of all, we have Sir Mike Pitt, who is sat here, and Sir Mike, with his background as Chair and Chief Executive of the Planning Inspectorate, is really well placed to explain this process, where we've come from, where the critical stage that we're at now, and what is to come. So Sir Mike will explain all of that for us. Then we have Professor Richard Skeffington.
Good evening.
And Richard will tell us about the plans, what it is looking like now, and critically, what are those key impacts that we see. We will then have a short video from Dan Kozelko. Dan is our planning barrister, and he's going to explain our call to action. He's going to explain what it means to submit a relevant representation. And he's a fantastic man, and he's very focused and very experienced, and we're absolutely thrilled and relieved that he is representing us. So we will have that, and if we have time, we really hope also we have a message from our MP, Dr. Ros Savage, and we would love to play that to you as well. We will have time for questions, and so if you have any questions, I hope that it will be obvious on your Zoom how to submit your questions, and we will make sure that we get to as many of those as we can. We will also put up this Zoom presentation and onto the website. So with no further ado, I'm just going to share the screen and then hand it over to Sir Mike. Hoping that this all works, so bear with me just half a moment, and we will get it going. Says I can hear people still coming in, but lovely. So I'm hoping that you will be able to see the screen, and so over to Sir Mike. Thank you.
Anna Kate, thank you very much indeed for the introduction. As Anna rightly says, we are moving now to a very important part of the process, a part of the process where every member of the public, and in fact their friends and relatives, have an opportunity to influence the way in which the inspectorate, the examining authority, undertakes its work during next year. So the first slide is just to try and locate us in terms of the process itself. Getting an approval for a nationally significant infrastructure project like Lime Down is a long and drawn out process. And so we're talking about 2 to 3 years from first seeing the initial plans right through to the eventual decision by the Secretary of State. So here we are. Here's the one I want. This is the timeline for the project. So first of all, if we look backwards, I think many of you will recall the periods of consultation, first a statutory consultation, and then a special one added on by the developers of a targeted consultation, partly because they hadn't completed the design of the scheme in the first place. And the application then was made to the Planning Inspectorate on the 19th of September and was accepted by the Planning Inspectorate on the 17th of October. So that now brings us up to the present day, and we are in the middle now of a registration period. And as I mentioned, this is a time when you can make your comments, and these will be looked at by the examining authority and taken fully into account. The next step after that is the appointment of the examining authority. In fact, we know we will have two very senior inspectors who work for the Planning Inspectorate. They will be taking this right through to completion. And after that, there will be a preliminary meeting. And that meeting is when we have a chance to influence the timetable of the examination. And then looking into the longer term future, the examination itself will last for 6 months. That will be followed by a recommendation written by the examining authority, and that will be submitted to the Secretary of State, who has a further 3 months to make the decision. So registration is the big issue for us at the moment, and important for everybody who's listening in to play their part. And what I'm going to do is just to cover the simple steps involved in registering and making your relevant representation. A technical term that the Planning Inspectorate use. Basically, you'll be giving some observation and comments to the examining authorities for them to take into account. So who can register? Well, effectively, anybody can. It doesn't matter whether you're a child or an OAP. Everybody can register who has an interest in this project. Also, organizations can register. So, for example, charities or a business can register in their own right. And we're hoping that all town and parish councils will register because, importantly, they express the views of their wider communities. So I'm inviting you to think about not just yourself being involved in this, which is critical, but also who else could you encourage to apply and register in the same way as you will. And the more we have, the better it is, because the inspectorate will be very interested in the total number of people who register for Limedown, because that gives a fairly good indication of just how wide the feelings are in the community. So when to register? Well, now. The deadline, if you fail to register by the 9th of January, then you'll be cut off. Anybody after that date, the registration will not be accepted by the Planning Inspectorate. So that is an absolute deadline. But I think I would advise everybody to get on with this now. Remember that between now and the 9th of January, we've got Christmas shopping, and then we've got Christmas itself, and then there's New Year and all those celebrations. So the best thing is to get this done as quickly as you can whilst it's uppermost in your minds, and whilst some of the things that you'll learn tonight can figure in the representations that you make. So very important, registration and relevant representations, all one single process. It's much easier than it sounds. A little thought is to just jot down on a piece of paper before you start logging on to the website. Jot down the things that you feel are really important, the things that you would like to mention. There may be, for you, 2 or 3. Don't try and cover everything under the sun. Just cover the things that matter to you the most and which are relevant to the quality of your life. Once you've signed off at the end of the registration process, you cannot go back and change it. So it's a once and for all, and then it's done. Right, here's how to do it. First thing is to use Google. That's the way I go in. I use Google, and I just put in Planning Inspectorate Limedown, and that will get you through to the website, Limedown at planninginspectorate.gov.uk. I then suggest you click on project information, then click on register to have your say, and then click on start now. And that means you're in and ready to go. Now, here are the things that you'll be asked to do. These are simple instructions. First one is, who are you registering for? And there's a little drop down, and the answer is myself. Then you put in your full name, Christian name and surname. It asks if you're 18 or over. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can register. Then you put in your email address, your postal address, your phone number, just in case the Planning Inspectorate want to contact you to follow something up. And then you get to the bit, the important bit is, what do you want to tell us? And you just type in a few sentences on each of the main issues. This is not the time to put in masses and masses of evidence. That will all come later, months later, next year. So at this stage, all you're doing is flagging up the issues that you're concerned about, and those will be taken into account by the examining authority when they draw up their timetable for examination. You get a chance then to check your answers, to put anything right that you think you might have got wrong. You then there's a declaration button, you step on that, and then finally you submit your registration, and it's done and it's finished. So that's the overall process. And as I say, it's best if you get on with that as soon as you possibly can. When you do so, you will be then an interested party, and you will be given a reference number, a unique reference number. And that's done because if the examiners want to come back to you for any reason, they have that number and they can identify you and make a connection. Okay, I think I've got to the end of that. I'm going to handing over to you.
You might be another slide.
Another click.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness me, there was one I nearly missed. Here's a couple of examples of the sorts of things you might put down when you're trying to explain your issues. You can read these at your leisure later. They're just simple examples. The first one is about somebody who feels that the overall area is of great importance, and these are the sorts of things they want to mention. The second one is somebody who likes walking on the public rights of way or cycling, and again, giving some reasons why. There's no need to go into long explanations, short and sharp at this stage, so that the examining authority is clear about the point that you're trying to raise, and then later on there'll be time for giving evidence. Thank you very much. Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So good evening. I'm Richard Skeffington. As Anna Kate said, I'm going to be doing two things. First is to introduce the scheme to you again. If you may know something about it already, but it has changed quite a bit. So this is just the current state of the scheme as in IGP's submission to the Planning Inspectorate. And secondly, I'm going to go through some of the issues that you might be concerned about, not to tell you what to say, because that's entirely up to you, but just to remind you of what they are and the sort of things that we think about them. So first, the scheme. So this is the developer's map, except that I've changed the color of the panels from their green to black, which I think is much more appropriate. So the black areas are all fields covered with solar panels. In yellow, you can see the towns and villages which enclose the scheme. Also shown on the map in red is the cable. This is the big 400 kilovolt cable heading off down to Melksham and passing close by Grittleton there. More about that later. Also in the scheme, there are yellow blobs. There's a yellow blob in Rodbourne. These are electricity substations, 132 kilovolt substations. I'll show you a picture of these later. Big intrusive things in the landscape. And the very biggest blob, the blob that's next to the red blob, is a 400 kilovolt substation, even bigger one. And this is north of the railway in Hallavington. The red blob is a BESS, a battery storage system, which it stores electricity from the scheme, but also from the grid. Now, as well as the main cable down to Melksham's, there will be quite sizable cables connecting up the different parts of the scheme, and these are shown as yellow lines. These are my guess as to where they're going, but I think they've got to be close to that. So this is the scheme, and this is the size of it. It's you see various figures depending on how you like to measure it, but 1848 acres without the cable routes. The envelope of the scheme is about 18 square miles. And one thing you might notice on the previous map, and I'll just go back to it. If you look on the far left of that black area, you'll see possibly the red line and some blank fields. Those were panels originally. They've pulled back there. Likewise, on the area just south of Shurston, area A, up the right-hand side of it, you can see the same thing. Areas that were in the scheme did have panels, but now no longer do. And this is, they pulled these back, they've reduced the size of the scheme slightly. And for this, we've got to thank the Cotswold National Landscape Board, which abuts these fields completely. And they were not impressed that right up against the national landscape, they'd be right up against these ugly solar panels. So they forced the developer to push back. There's one or two other places as well. And the number of solar panels, it's a bit ambiguous, but maybe something like 650,000. But these aren't ordinary solar panels like you see in schemes around the place. They're exceptionally large ones, 4.5 meters high. That's about the height of a double-decker bus. And they're tracking panels. They track the sun as it moves across the sky. They'll be oriented like this, facing east in the morning. They'll go round till they're more or less flat at noon, and they'll head off so they're facing in the other direction in the evening. And this is all driven by motors, which are in the middle of the panels you see here, and which will, so they'll be whirring and clanking away during the day. This is just another picture to give you some idea of the size of them. So this is an ordinary size guy from another opposition group. The top of the pole is the height of the tracking panels when they are tilted. If they can't actually, get these in for some objection, they're too conspicuous, then they intend to use smaller static panels, but even these are about 3.5 meters high. So they're almost twice the height of a typical panel, which is roughly the height of a person as shown at the bottom. And if you drive around the area in Shurston and Hallavington, you can see stacks of straw bales which illustrate the exact heights of these panels. So large and intrusive panels. Now I mentioned electricity substations. This is their picture of a 132 kilovolt substation, and there's going to be 4 of these. So I said each just over 2 acres, up to 23 feet high, and surrounded by metal security fences. So again, large and ugly features of the landscape. And this is the big substation. It won't be quite as big as this one. It's because it's hard to get a good photograph of these. This one is the one for Hinkley Point. Ours will be about a third the size maybe, but still occupying 10.5 acres and 43 feet high at the highest. So an even larger and conspicuous part of the landscape that will be just north of the railway line, just north of Hallavington. And as well as these, scattered around the place, there will be what they call conversion units. And these are like giant shipping containers. They convert, if you've got panels on your roof, you'll know you need an inverter to convert the direct current into alternating current. These are the same. They also have a transformer in them to up the voltage a bit. So they're going to be 166 of them, they say, or something like that, scattered around the whole area. And there's also an unknown number of switch rooms, which are the same size, but only have switch gear in them. And in terms of size, well, in terms of volume, they're actually 7 times bigger than an ordinary shipping container. So again, conspicuous features. Now, the cable route, and I hope you can see this because I can't point things out to you, which I would do in the live lecture. But at the top there is the scheme, the different areas, and the cable route is in red, heading south, down past Grittleton, Yatton Kennel, Chippenham, and down to Whitley and Melksham at the bottom. This is the cable route. Also shown as dotted lines is where the lorries that are going to supply the cable route, the cables, the various bits of engineering equipment are going to come in from. So on the left-hand side, their route is in from M4 junction 18, up the A46 to the Cross Hands pub, then along to Acton Turville, down and through Burton to Grittleton. And from Grittleton, they'll be distributed to the cable route down the road towards Yatton Kennel. Also, you can see just about here are what they call construction compounds in yellow. And these are places where they're going to lay down the stuff. There'll be porter cabins, toilets for the workers, and so forth. When they're building the cable, which will take 2 years or so, then these will be full of equipment. And there's one of these at Grittleton, and there's one near Yatton Kennel, just next to the golf driving range. As you can see, there's one in Chippenham and down to Corsham and Whitley. And as well as these, wherever the roads intersect with the cable, then there are what they call laydown areas where the access roads reach the cable. And these are quite similar, smaller, but still quite big, 80 by 80 meters. South of Yatton Kennel, the cable route will be accessed down the Chippenham bypass through various roads going in. And I think they've done it this way to avoid traffic through Yatton Kennel, where there's a primary school right next to the road. And the cable isn't just a guy with a JCB digging a trench. It's a major operation, and there'll be 3 400,000 volt cables, a fiber optic cable and a low voltage control cable, so 5 cables. And here you can see the workers putting them in and also boring under the little track that's in the background. And this is the technique they use. They will be able to go underneath the roads, underneath the railway, underneath the motorway, and underneath rivers. This is a technique called horizontal direct drilling. It saves disruption on the surface, but it does have implications, particularly it's noisy, and it also has implications for groundwater. Now this is a cable that's almost finished. The cable's in the trench on the left. The trench has been filled in and it's almost ready to be restored. Next to the cable route, there will be a haul road where traffic comes up and down. Here it's wooden slats. They'll use the ground surface where if they think it's firm enough. To the right of that, there's a storage area where they've had their equipment. And then to the right of that, there's a pile of topsoil which has been scraped off and will be used to restore the site. If it's done competently, the cable should disappear in a couple of years, but that remains to be seen. So this whole width, they say they can do it in about 25 meters width. They've allowed themselves 50 meters. National Grids usually take a little more to do these cables, so we'll see whatever it is, it's a substantial gash out of the landscape. As well as these, there will be the cables that join the sites together, the yellow cables in the first diagram I showed. And these will be much the same. Its trench will be much the same size. We'll still need the haul road, but these will be going between different places. And on the site, there will be cables in trenches next to access tracks. Now I'm showing these pictures here these are pictures from another site being constructed to show that there will be a lot of disturbance of the soil while all this is going on. In the background here, you see a construction compound. It's probably a smaller one than the ones we're going to get, with porta cabins and stuff, etc. So that's the scheme. There's various other things, but that's the main features. Give you some idea what it will actually be like. Now, what we have here is a word cloud. And this is available on our website as well as in the presentation. And it's just a reminder of the issues that have been brought up by people, the things that you might be worried about. So, quality of life, landscape, size of the solar panels, etc., etc. And it's just a reminder of the things you might want to talk to the Planning Inspectorate about. Say that you're worried about footpaths, but also say why you're worried and which particular footpaths. So let's just go through one or two of them. And I think what many people will be concerned about is the effects on the landscape, the visual intrusion. And this is from outside. This is near Shurston, where I live. You can just see Luckington in the background, but the scheme will be visible in the fields over to the left. It will be visible from the outside, from the Cotswold National Landscape. Now, what they're meant to do is they're meant to give you photo montages that are meant to show what the scheme's like when it's built. Unfortunately, they mostly look like this. So these are solar panels. They can see them marching in serried rows. They've been oriented north-south. And this is the view from near Norton looking towards Lavington, as I'm sure you can tell. But just in one or two places, they've actually managed to fit the panels into photos of the landscapes. I'm just going to show you a couple of them. So this is Commonwood Lane near Shurston. It's one of the walks in the Shurston Walk booklet. The walk goes off round to the right. Here you can see the Commonwood Lane itself, and you can see the panels in the background. And you can also see the little vertical things in the foreground. These are tubes for tree planting. So this is the planting which is meant to screen the panels. I think you can see it's going to be at least 15 or 20 years before the panels disappear, if indeed they do. So large and conspicuous things. This shows what's known as the zone of theoretical visibility. It's where you will be able to see the scheme from if there are no obstacles in the way. And the scheme is the sort of variegated picture towards the top. The green areas show where you'll be able to see the scheme from. And the bottom right, we're up at Churhill on the edge of Salisbury Plain. Along the left, you can see the Cotswold Escarpment. You won't be able to see it from the plains. Up to the north, into the Cotswold landscape. And to the right, over to Brinkworth or even Wootton Bassett. It'll be visible from a long way away, potentially. And they're also meant to show viewpoints, and there's several whole documents of viewpoints. And this is something else you might like to talk to the Planning Inspectorate about. You like this particular view and it's going to be spoilt. Last summer was rather a nice summer, but they managed to pick a very dull day for doing all their viewpoints. This is again near Commonwood Lane, a public footpath going that way. We visited the same site the year before. This is our picture. As you can see, it's an area in reality where it would be nice to have a country walk. ecology and biodiversity. And this is an area where they will claim that they're going to improve things. And they're going to improve them by converting the current arable land, as you see in the field in the foreground, into grasslands. And it's going to be rich in species, and they're going to do tree planting, and it's all going to be beautiful. You should take this with a pinch of salt. For one thing, there will be ecological effects. One of them is, they admit, we'll lose about 3/4 of our skylark habitat because skylarks like open ground with no obstructions, like solar panels. There'll be hedges grubbed up to let them in, and there'll be fences, deer fences around each of the solar panel fields, and this just fragments the whole site. So it's animals that like to move around, like deer themselves, badgers, and so on, will be unable to do so anymore. I'm fairly convinced there's a high risk of getting sediment into the rivers and streams. And we do have protected species. There are lots of bats in the area anyway, but there are some protected bat areas close to the cable route. There are dormice, we have eels in the rivers, and we have the inevitable great crested newts. Now, they have to have plans for each of these, and the plans are there. We'll be getting our ecological consultants to look at this whole area, get to look at the plans and say, well, are the plans adequate? And this is one of the reasons we're using consultants. They're people with good qualifications, people that the Planning Inspectorate will listen to when we come to the examination phase. And we can use them to point out where the scheme is deficient. Inevitably, there'll be a lot of disturbance during construction, noise, there'll be lights, there'll be damage to the soil. And quite a few important habitats have been ignored in the actual environmental statement by IGP. But they will claim they can make things better because they'll mitigate some of it, and they will be able to get BNG, biodiversity net gain, which means that, okay, you've destroyed something, but you're going to replace it with a larger amount of something else. And they will be able to do that. But there are, excuse me, there are still caveats. And one of them is arable land's not an ecological desert. The farms are in environmental schemes, many of them. They already have things like strips across along hedgerows for biodiversity planting. Even the hedge on the right here is quite diverse. There are deciduous trees and so on. And another thing is it's actually very difficult to convert fertile ex-arable land into species-rich grassland. It's just too fertile. If you just plant it, what's likely to happen is that you'll get coarse grasses and weedy species. To actually reliably do it, you need to strip all the topsoil off, which wouldn't be a good thing anyway. There's a heavy reliance on tree planting, and I've planted plenty of trees myself, but it's not a panacea, and particularly because the trees need to be looked after. And NSIPs have got a terrible record with tree planting. On the A14 between Cambridge and Huntingdon, for instance, they planted 850,000 trees. They came back to check them 3 years later. 600,000 of them had died. So it needs money, it needs a workforce, it needs maintenance, and there's really no sign in their plans of any commitment to that. And another problem with BNG is the benefits can go somewhere else, particularly with the new planning bill. Then they can pay into a fund, someone else can dip into the fund and promote biodiversity in Northumberland or wherever. So Tech claims it's going to be better with a pinch of salt. It could be if they put enough into it, but there's little sign that they know what to do or how are prepared to put a lot of money into it. Now, agricultural land they have to do an agricultural land survey. That's some of the arable land in the catchment at the moment. And just to see if there's any good agricultural land which will be lost. And these are the results, showing that we had 4% very good quality land, grade 2, and 29% good quality land, grade 3A. And these two together are called best and most versatile land, BMV land. And there's a presumption against any development on these. We need to keep our agricultural land because we need the food. Unfortunately, because of the alleged need for cover the countryside in solar panels, then this isn't gaining much traction in discussions with the Planning Inspectorate, but you should still mention it if it's something that concerns you. On the cable route, there's even more BMV land, 75%. Now, this will only disappear temporarily. It should be restorable if it's done properly to grade 3A at least, whereas it will be permanently lost in the rest of the scheme, effectively. The scheme is meant to last for 60 years. What it will be like at the end of that, there's very little to guide us. Now, this is the poorest quality land we have. Grade 4 land. It doesn't look too bad, does it? The farmers had a decent grass crop off it. It's probably been downgraded because of poor drainage, which is exactly why the area is susceptible to floods. And just to say, the UK is the world's third largest food importer. We import nearly half our food. And this scheme, we will lose 590 acres of our best agricultural land. I'll just leave that thought with you. Transport and rights of way. Just want to show you some pictures from the only one of these huge schemes that's been built so far at Cleve Hill in Kent. And these are just lorries on the narrow roads. We have just getting there, lorries coming in and out by the same route, having to pass each other, tractors and other farm vehicles having to pass. There's damage to the sides of the roads, and I understand there's no automatic claim to compensation here. There's likely to be damage to the road surface, which are bad enough as it is. And we'll have lots of cement lorries because there's a lot of concrete pouring to be done. So, where are they planning? Which roads are going to be affected? If you follow the red lines up on the left of the diagram at the moment, we mentioned one of these routes already. So these are routes for HGVs coming into the scheme. So up from junction 18 to the Cross Hands, then down through Acton Turville and Burton to Grittleton, turning left up the Foss Way towards Ladyswood, and then for Area A little bit further on the road to Shurston. On the other side, up from junction 17 to the new Dyson roundabout, then either up towards Rodbourne. And in Rodbourne, they've decided that the narrow roads leading to Rodbourne are definitely not suitable for lorries, and they're going to build their own. They're going to build their own tarmac road down an existing bridleway off the A420 just before you reach Corston. They're also going to build the same thing going off to the left, not quite in the same place, to service the substation up there. And I should have mentioned earlier, in the early aspects of the scheme, this substation was another battery storage. They've converted it into a substation, which is good news for Corston and possibly Malmesbury, but you still have a substation on top of the hill. The rest of the traffic there will go up past Lavington and in like that, and after that rather awkward corner. And on the left, it's mostly traffic to service the battery storage. The total HGV movements will be around 26,000, according to them. We have a very good transport consultant who's very experienced with these schemes. He thinks this is a gross underestimate, and he will be looking to see how their estimates stack up. And again, he's got the qualifications to talk to the Planning Inspectorate and be listened to. So the peak HD movement's about 150 a day. So if you are out about on any of these roads, then you will find it's quite likely you will meet an HGV or two, or possibly several. And if you look closely at these two roads, if we live in Shurston, Luckington, down there, you'll see they pretty well block off access to the motorway. And if we want to do it and avoid this area, we're going to have to drive through Malmesbury and down the main roads which are better able to cope with the HGVs. This just shows roughly how many daily movements, so in terms of vehicles a day, are likely by these two routes. The first figure is the HGVs, the lorries. The second is the workers in cars coming into the site, because there'll be about 600 workers on site at any one time. You can see it's about 50 lorries coming in from the west side, 218 cars going up past Grettleton up towards Shurston. The other side, about twice as many, 98, nearly 100, 240 cars. The majority of those passing Hallavington, and about 22 and 100 cars going to Rodbourne. So a lot of traffic on roads that are fundamentally unsuited. And they recognise this in places. So in places they have going to do some roadworks, particularly from the Grettleton crossroads up to the Foss, probably laybys, we don't know, cutting bends off. It's not very specific. So again, there'll be quite a bit of disruption around the place. There's 10 or 15, 20 different areas of roadworks that they're going to be doing during the construction period. And as well as that, we've got what are called abnormal indivisible loads, AILs, big things like transformers, which will come in on vehicles like this. Possibly not quite as big as this one. This is a transformer, but it's a very, very big one. Here's a smaller version, but probably bigger than that one. It's vehicles that require police escorts. And we know the routes they're coming in on. They will, they rather belatedly realised that they couldn't get things like that under the Kingway Railway Bridge just south of Corston. So they've had to devise a new route up on the right-hand side of your picture in orange, up past the Swindon bypass, right up to Cirencester, then down through Crudwell, Malmesbury to the Rodbourne area. And this is also going to involve modifications to roundabouts in Cirencester, the same one that's been modified for the last 2 years, and in Malmesbury, one of the ones in Malmesbury. The rest of them, they're going to try and get in from junction 18, like the HDVs, but they know that some of the vehicles won't be able to take the left turn in Grettleton or the one by the Jib. And these they're going to have to bring in from the south through Yatton Kennel so they can take that junction head on. And then further south down various roads around Chippenham. So these things, there won't be many of them, but when they do, they'll be very slow and very disruptive. So getting away from vehicular traffic, effects on public rights of way, footpaths, bridleways should really be of concern to anyone who likes to walk or cycle or ride in the countryside. Now, they have done another half reasonable photo montage of a public right of way. This is looking down the right of way again. This is Conwood Lane. The track is a real thing, and the bit of vegetation on the right and the rest, and the trees in the background, the rest is synthesized. So rights of way will be in sort of canyons between sets of solar panels or substations or whatever. They will also be allowed to close them temporarily for safety reasons while they're constructing, and typically this will be a couple of months. You may find your right of way disappearing. If we look at real rights of way in real schemes, this is one in the Spittleborough Solar Farm at Wootton Bassett. You can see an even narrower canyon and no attempt to give it a decent surface for walking. So there's going to be a substantial loss of amenity because you're going to have to ask yourself, do you want to walk down one of these canyons, watched by security cameras, and listening to quite a lot of noise, as we're about to come to? So again, if the Planning Inspectorate, you should tell them, I like to walk on this field particularly, and it's going to be spoilt by solar panels. Now, we also have the issue of noise, and the panels are going to have to be put in on piles. And because they're big panels, they will need deep piles. They say up to 4 meters deep. And the substations, etc., will require even deeper piles, up to 12 meters deep, they say. We reckon there may be something like 1 million pile driving operations. And the issue here, well, there's several issues. One of them is they're noisy. So this is the noise of a pile driver. Hope you can hear it. I certainly can. This will be going on all through the working hours. They claim that it won't be audible for more than a few meters away. Again, we have noise consultants. We have people who are very good, who are onto this. They'll be looking critically at this. They'll be challenging their statements. And then there's horizontal direct drilling under roads, streams, etc. Mostly an issue down the cable routes. And the issue is that once you start this, you've got to continue till you finish. This may mean running through the night, and that may mean if you're close to them, you're going to lose a night's sleep. And then there'll be the usual construction noise you get from big projects, HGVs, heavy machinery in the fields, and so on. However, this is just the construction period. That's about 2 and a bit years. Once it's operating, of course, there will still be noise. And in particular, there'll be noise from the transformers which hum. But the inverters, the combination units, remembering there's 166 of them, they say, have got cooling fans which are quite noisy. And one of our supporters recorded the noise from the existing inverter cabins at Lavington Solar Farm, which sounds something like this. Obviously, it depends how close you are to them, but this will be the sound which you hear as you walk through the countryside. When it's sunny, they go quiet at night, but the battery, the BESS, will be particularly noisy. And there's a whole chapter on noise in the environmental statement. They do things like they produce contours of noise during the day. If you can see this well enough, you can see the sort of little mountains. These are probably mostly the converter units. And the sort of is a little difficult to tell because the top of the mountain, as it were, they're saying the noise is just greater than 50 decibels without saying how much greater. So we don't really know. But again, our consultants will be on this. And this is an issue, I think, for anyone who's walking through. Let's do that in a second. But there will also be noise at night, and this will predominantly come from the battery storage. And here it is, that contour, that's Lavington. The north side of Lavington will be within their contours, and also Norton on the other side. So this tells you what they're mostly going to use the battery for. It's going to be used to import electricity from the grid during night when it's cheap, and then export it during the day when it's expensive. And this means that the people close to the BESS are going to hear it through the night. So the conversion units won't have much of sound during the night, but the BESS will. And this just shows you this, one of the bits of the noise contours a little closer up. This is the Rodbourne area. Rodbourne's on the top right-hand side. The things labeled R06 and so on are receptors, they call them, places where people live, which are being assessed to see how noisy it's going to be. and the ones in red are ones which are above what they call the lowest observable effect level, which means you can hear it and it's irritating. So it's a it's a highly technical area. We've got our consultants covering this. They'll be looking very critically and trying to protect us against false statements about the amount of noise. And how about socioeconomic, the effects on the economy of the area? Now, Ed Miliband's fond of boasting about how many green jobs he's creating. We know from the environmental statement how many green jobs will be created on site, and the answer is none. It says the number of people employed on site will be 0, and there will be 15 full-time equivalent jobs, which are probably maintenance crews shared with other sites. So it's plus 15 jobs, permanent jobs, but there will be job losses. More than that in agriculture, even though modern agriculture doesn't employ many people. A number of tenant farmers we know will be without a viable farm because some of their best land has been taken for solar panels. There'll probably be job losses in agricultural service firms that supply the farming, which is no longer being done. And if you have a tourism-dependent business, a cafe or a pub, and you're partly dependent on walkers and cyclists, well, during the construction period, no cyclist is going to want to fight it out with the HGVs on our narrow roads. So there'll be a considerable reduction in footfall, we think. If you've got a residential business, a Airbnb, for instance, likewise. Once construction is finished, then it will be less attractive to walkers and cyclists. So this will mean that the area takes a hit. And again, if that's something of concern to you, then you should mention it to the Planning Inspectorate. And there will be jobs in construction, but probably not too many. This is Cleve Hill again being built. That's what it will look like. They'll bring their own digger drivers and so forth outside. And this does raise the issue of where are these people going to live? And, what pressure they're going to put on services. We know health services locally are under pressure. There's going to be people having accidents, people and extra populations. What about that? Again, tell the Planning Inspectorate. And then flooding, one of my particular concerns. Most people know that the area is very susceptible to flooding, and about a year ago, Storm Bert just reminded us all about that. The flooding extended down the Bristol Avon, down to Chippenham, Melksham, Bradford, and even further. This is the centre of Chippenham, the river running left to right. The channel going up to the top of the picture is Chippenham High Street, lots of stores were seriously affected by flooding. But there's a whole chapter on flood protection. It's mostly concerned with protecting their own assets from floodwater. If they think floodwater's going to be inundating their solar panels, they say, well, we'll just build it a bit higher up. So we'll build a bigger concrete plinth to put our substations on and so on. So they're trying to argue that there will be no effect on flooding. I disagree, but it is important for you in the relevant representations to tell the Planning Inspectorate you're concerned about flooding. There's no need to go into the technicalities, but any stories about, because what we all know is that every year the local roads flood. We know which ones you can get through and which you can't, and that's quite apart from large events like Storm Bert. And then we also to be concerned about our drinking water. We get our drinking water from the aquifer, the Great Ulat Aquifer, mostly under the ground, and Wessex Water abstract from immediately under the panels in Rodbourne for Bath and Chippenham. To me, this is a very valuable asset, far more valuable than what's going to be some very expensive electricity. And this is protected partly by a layer of relatively impermeable rock on the top. If we're going to put deep piles into it, that protection is going to be lost. And we know there's pollution lurking around on the top. There could be pollution from the panels themselves if they're damaged, but the biggest potential source of pollution is a fire in the battery storage, and we'll come to that in a minute. So this is an issue. I mean, it's not only our drinking water, but the water in these aquifers flows into the rivers. It's water quality in the rivers as well. If you've got a private water supply, you should tell the Planning Inspectorate once again, because you are entitled to protection of your source. And indeed, the whole area is a groundwater source protection zone, which is meant to protect our drinking water. This is the battery energy storage system. This is their picture, but there'll be more containers than this, up to 270, they say. This is next to the railway, which the railway is not too happy about, I gather, just north of Lavington. And the main issue is here that you get fires. They're rare events, let's be fair, but potentially devastating when they occur. And they're not really fires, they're runaway chemical reactions. And the consensus is there's no way to put them out. All you can do is let them burn out and keep adjacent batteries, containers cool so that they don't catch fire as well. This is a big best fire earlier this year at Moss Landing in California. It's the chimneys, it's an ex-power station. The chimneys you can see on the right are 500 feet high. This gives you some idea of the scale. You can see the pollutant plume rising up and just starting to fall. It's going to come to the ground at 3 or 4 kilometers distant. So you don't need to be close to the best to be potentially affected. And they've done some modeling. They claim there won't be any effects beyond the absolute immediate vicinity of the best. Again, we'll be looking critically at that. We had our own best fire up near Cirencester earlier in this year. This is a picture. This blob there is, it's an infrared picture. It shows one of the battery containers exploding. This is a light picture showing the fire that occurred in the container. It eventually spread also to the one on the left. The whole thing was a catalogue of errors which left people exposed to toxic fumes for 3 or 4 hours. And we, Stop Lyme Down, have got another Zoom lecture by lithium battery expert Marcus Jones. That's at 6:30 on the 26th of November. Look on our website, it will give you details. Anyone can join in. And finally, be relieved to know I'm getting towards the end. There are lots of other things you can consider, glint and glare from the panels, for instance, effects on human health, cultural heritage like this. Because this is a historic landscape. There are Roman roads like the Fossway shown here, medieval roads, and they've had to do an archaeological survey and discovered 118 archaeological assets, they call. They had major damage to 23 of these is likely. There's over 700 listed buildings and so on and so on. If this is something that concerns you, tell the Planning Inspectorate and tell them why it concerns you. And finally, this isn't a planning issue, so it's not much point in saying this to the Planning Inspectorate. But I thought I'd better include this because I know a lot of you may be thinking, well, okay, it's going to be damaging, but we do need to decarbonize our energy system. And that's something I personally agree with. But this is a very, very expensive way to use solar panel power. And the reason is, it's a misconception, really. What we're used to seeing is something on the left of the picture where we've got a fossil fuel or nuclear power station, which is a very concentrated source of power. And it feeds through a transformer into the power lines, which spread it around the country and spread it down through various other transformers into our houses and factories. But solar is not a concentrated source of energy, it's a diffuse source of energy. And what this scheme is doing is collecting the solar, through various transformers, inverters, the things I've been talking about, through a very long cable to the national grid at Melksham, and then down through the same thing again to the houses and factories. And people say, well, you know, so the sun is free, the panels are become a lot cheaper recently, so it should be a cheap source of power, shouldn't it? But it's not. And one of the reasons is that all the other infrastructure here, the transformers, the inverters, and particularly the cable, are phenomenally expensive, and they haven't got any cheaper. On the contrary, there's so much of this going on around the world, there's a shortage, and the price has gone up accordingly. And from the environmental point of view, the other thing is these transformers, inverters, cables, etc., have a huge amount of what's called embodied carbon. It takes a lot of carbon dioxide production to make them. And because of this, it's quite possible that it will certainly reduce the carbon benefits of the scheme, but it's quite possible there'll be no carbon benefits at all. And this just seems senseless to me. What we should be doing is accepting solar as diffuse and using it locally, so that we collect it, we put it through a small transformer into the local part of the grid, and then distribute it to houses locally. There's no huge transformers, there's no high voltage underground power lines or pylons, and there's a much lower carbon footprint. And why aren't we doing that? Well, because doing it the way Lime Down is doing it is the only way to get an income stream to the big companies like Macquarie, which are the owners of Island Green Power and who will benefit from this. And they wouldn't be contemplating it without the enormous subsidies which are going onto our electricity bills and causing them to go higher and higher. And just to finalize, I'll just show you what the renewable subsidies, the subsidies from wind and solar amount to, starting in 2002 at around £2 billion a year, and now up to over £25 billion a year, which is almost £1,000 for the average household every year. And this is a country where 20% of people can't afford their electricity bills. I think this is unacceptable personally. So if you oppose this scheme, you will not only, and we succeed, you will not only mean that we lose the damage to the local environment, but you'll improve the national economy, and quite probably you will not in any way impair the government's attempts to decarbonise the energy system. So that's all I want to say, but we now have a quick video from our planning barrister, Dan Kozelko. Dan has the distinction of being the junior barrister in the only solar application of a big NSIP application that was rejected by the Planning Inspectorate, who were then overruled by Ed Miliband. But he's a good buy. This is an edited video. There's a bigger one that you can watch on our website. Here he goes. Oh, wait a minute. All right. I'll go over to you.
Just to let you know, I realise that you won't hear the sound, so I'm just going to quickly stop that share to make sure that you do hear it of Dan, because it's a really helpful video. But just whilst I'm just fiddling around with that, I'm going to put on the sound of the piling, which you may not have heard earlier. Pretty ghastly. Sorry, I'm going to stop that because it's too horrid. I hope now you will be able to, I'm going to just press play on this recording of Dan, and I hope you'll be able to hear it.
Hello, I'm Dan Kozelko, a planning barrister. Hello, I'm Dan Kozelko, a planning barrister representing Stop Lime Down in the examination of Lime Down Solar Farm. So it's important to be involved now so the examiners know what locals think of this scheme and why this scheme should ultimately be refused. Now, the stage we're at the decision process is relevant representations, or you having your say. Now, what that means is all of you get the opportunity to put your first statement to the examining authority. And that's important. This is not a consultation anymore where you're speaking to IGP about the scheme. You're speaking to the examiners who will ultimately make the recommendation to the Secretary of State. And for that reason, it's important that you're involved now. It's also important because relevant representations is how you let the examiners know that you want to be involved in the examination. If you make relevant representations, you have an entitlement to speak at subsequent hearings, to be informed of what's going on, and to give evidence where appropriate so the examiners know things about the scheme. Importantly, you need to put some comments. Now, those comments should explain why this scheme shouldn't be consented. And they should be comments about this scheme locally. Why not this scheme? Why not here? And so it's your local view that's really important. Things like the human impact that you will experience are things that you can put in your relevant representation. Things like the recreational harm when you walk down a public right-of-way, or the views from your house or from the national landscape, or transport concerns about the number of HGVs that will be coming down the narrow roads around this area. There's no issue that shouldn't be included if you are concerned about it. But importantly, you need to explain why it shouldn't be this scheme and why it shouldn't be here. And overall, just make sure that the examiners don't have a question about why you are objecting to the scheme. The reason why that matters is because the examiners will look at this and decide how to examine the scheme based on what you've said. They'll take account of what everyone has said about the problems of the scheme and list that, include that in the timetable to understand the scheme better and to better recommend their position to the Secretary of State.
Great. So I hope that you heard that. I'm going to just stop that share for now. We are going to try and get Ros, our MP's video message on as well. But just before we do that, we wondered if there were any questions. So if anybody had a question, please let us know. Very welcome to unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to see. You might have to unmute yourself and ask a question because I can't see you. I'm so sorry. Whose land is it is one of the questions. So the land is it's 9 different landowners who have signed up. In fact, Mike, you've probably got something to say about that.
Well, the way this works is that the developer, IGP, first of all notified or became aware of the connection at Melksham. And so they started a search of where they could locate the solar farm. And what they found was a number of landowners who were willing to enter into contractual arrangements. And as Anna-Kate says, there's a handful of them who've signed contracts which are quite secretive. We don't know exactly what the wording says. Significant sums of money have already been exchanged, and further sums will be exchanged if this project were to be approved. So this is a big financial arrangement which has been conducted by the developers, and one in which we are very unhappy about, but therefore we have to tolerate that at this stage.
Lovely. And why all the way to Melksham? It seems really far. Absolutely.
Well, it is far, and as far as I can tell, it's by far the furthest solar farm in terms of distance from the national grid. And of course, that connection is highly expensive. It has to be paid for. and it's very disruptive. It's going through any number of farms on the way and other landowners affected. And this is a major engineering operation that goes alongside the solar park itself. We are quite surprised at the distance involved. We think there are other areas environmentally much more suited to solar park than Lime Down. But they've chosen this one because they had the cooperation from the landowners.
Thank you very much indeed. Somebody's asking us about the experts and funding, and I really wanted to say a massive big thank you to many of you who have actually signed up to the 1000 Club. It is really due to your incredible generosity that we have had the confidence to be able to instruct the experts. They will be scrutinising the plans and they will be then representing us at the hearings during the examination next year. So the 1000 Club, for those of you that don't know, is a direct debit, £10 or more a month, and we are incredibly grateful for that support. If you aren't already a member and would like to, that would be amazing. We still have a further £300,000 to raise between now and mid next year. It is a vast amount. It's eye-watering. We will be doing fundraising events, but it's enormous. So any help that people can do, that would be incredible. But a huge thank you for that. And I'm just looking at any other questions that we had. Why are we not reaching the younger generation? Well, that's a very, very good point. We would love you to please spread the word. We're really asking everybody to let 10 people know. If you could let family members know, friends, your whole address book, anybody that lives, it doesn't matter where they live actually, it doesn't matter if they're adult or child, everybody has a voice, and we really want people to take up this opportunity to be heard. So please do spread the word, and do let people know. A lot of people have said, well, you know, it is not really that bad anyway. And actually, I think what they're looking at is some of these more local, small community-run solar. And you're absolutely right, that isn't. But this scheme is not that. And hopefully this presentation has explained that. It's the wrong location, wrong size, and wrong ownership. We might just pause there. I'm going to see if we can, Claire might be able to run Ros Savage's video. Claire's going to have a go at doing that just now.
Hi everyone, my name's Ros Savage and I'm the Member of Parliament for the South Cotswolds, which includes the area affected by the proposed Lime Down Solar Park. I'm really sorry I can't be with you in person today. I'll be going to the Malmesbury event on the 10th. But I wanted to send a message of support and to encourage everybody to send their feedback to the Planning Inspectorate. It really can make a difference. I also really want to thank Stop Lime Down for doing such an amazing job, for bringing people together and continuing to lead such a strong, principled campaign. I personally have been opposed to this proposal since before I was even elected, and I've stood shoulder to shoulder with local residents ever since. I've raised the issue in Parliament, I've led a debate on solar on agricultural land, I've hosted a cross-party meeting with other NSIP campaign groups, and I've repeatedly pressed for a meeting with the Secretary of State for Energy Security. That meeting was arranged, but sadly, he pulled out. From the very start, this proposal, in my mind, has been deeply flawed. The community has been sidelined throughout, not involved in these conversations, with consultation processes that were inadequate and, in my opinion, disrespectful. It's simply unacceptable that after feedback was submitted, the developers actually decided to enlarge the site, ignoring local voices and the clear evidence that this massive scheme is the wrong approach for our area, not least because it is 100% owned by Macquarie, and we already know what they have done to Thames Water. To be absolutely clear, I'm not against solar energy, but I am against poor planning, bad process, and large-scale developments being imposed on rural communities without proper consultation or benefit. We should be investing in solar where it makes sense, on rooftops and brownfield sites and over car parks, not sacrificing agricultural land or undermining public trust in renewable energy. Island Green Power have shown disregard for communities across the country. Their parent company, Macquarie, their record speaks for itself, including, as I mentioned, the financial mismanagement of Thames Water. This just isn't the kind of company that we should be entrusting with projects of this scale and significance. They have already shown us what their priority is. And in my mind, their priorities are not the energy security of this country or the well-being of our rural communities and countryside. So I will continue to hold the government to account in Parliament and to push for a more transparent, community-led approach to renewable energy, one that supports both our climate goals and our beautiful landscapes. Thank you all so much for coming along today, for making your voices heard, and for standing together to protect our countryside. And remember, do please take the time to submit your feedback to the Planning Inspectorate. Every response counts. Together, we can send a powerful message that our communities deserve to be listened to, and Limedown must not go ahead.
Lovely, thank you. So another question has come through. What's the lifespan of the solar panels and what happens when that time span ends? Richard, are you able to answer that?
Well, yes, I think so. So you get various figures for this. What they're saying currently is about 30, 40 years. And then since this is meant to be a 60-year project, then they will replace them at least once. So, so again, yet more construction and disruption. What happens to them afterwards? Well, they contain valuable metals, but currently there's no way to recycle them. But I mean, it's people expect there will possibly be some time because there are going to be so many disused solar panels coming away from these schemes. And so that may or may not occur. I expect it will. It's probably highly energy deficient, energy consuming process and not terribly inefficient.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Another question, have any large solar farms had planning declined? And what were the factors that counted against the approval?
Well, so far, only a very small number of these large solar parks have been put through the system to the end of the system. And so far, they've been approved by the Secretary of State, Ed Miliband. Now, Sonica, I think, has been mentioned. Sonica was one where the Planning Inspectorate recommended refusal, but that recommendation from the examining authority was overturned by the Secretary of State. I think it's important to bear in mind that the Secretary of State has to behave reasonably in all the circumstances. If he continues to always approve them, then I think he will be found to be behaving unreasonably, and that will mean the Secretary of State could be challenged by a judicial review. And certainly that's something that we are bearing in mind in Stop Limedown.
Thank you. I've got another question that's just come through. Does the power generated power local homes and businesses? Who'd like to?
Yeah, well, the answer is no, because that it's not really how the grid works. I mean, it goes into a common pool and it could be used anywhere effectively. So the answer is no.
Thank you. Has IGP declared the carbon footprint of each of the panels?
Each of the panels, they have to do a carbon footprint, and they have had a go at it. Yet again, this is an area where we will have an expert consultant to look at what they're saying because they're trying their best to minimize it. Yes, I mean, the panels, but it's not just the panels, of course. All the other infrastructure has to be considered, all the diesel fuel that's used to, transport the workers in, transport things to the site. everything's included. It's a massively complex thing, but yes, they have to do it. What they are not doing is comparing it to the amount of electricity generated, because they're not telling us that. And they say, oh, well, it depends on exactly how the scheme, how big the scheme is. But this is, again, given the panels we have, our consultants will be able to give a good estimate of how much power it's going to produce.
Lovely, thank you. Another question, presumably the panels are made in China by the Uyghur slave labour. Can we be sure that the government doesn't allow slave labour produced panels?
I don't think we can be sure of that. I mean, the developers will say that they've bought their panels in good faith. They will make an assumption that they've been manufactured in some appropriate way. I think we all know that other things are happening in China, and there are concerns about manufacturing operations in China. And I think more scrutiny of that is urgently required.
Absolutely. Will the panels and BESS contaminate the surrounding soil and water courses?
Yes, well, the panels themselves ought to be fairly inert, as if they're intact. They do say they might wash them once a year. They claim they're going to do it with distilled water. That seems a bit unlikely to me, but they claim they're not going to use chemicals. If the panels do get damaged, and they do get damaged, they're vulnerable to things like hail, high winds, and so forth. Then there is the risk of things leaking out, not only the metals that are there to capture the electricity, but they also have things like the PFASs, these organic compounds, which are quite toxic in very small amounts and which are already a problem in our water supply. The batteries, then the issue is, again, if there's a fire and the water that's used to put them out is potentially full of debris from the fires, from the panels, from the batteries, which are disintegrating, potentially high concentrations of very toxic things, then what they're saying is, well, we're enclosing the battery in a waterproof place with a waterproof bottom and a bund around the side, and we'll collect all the water, and only if we can be shown it's not toxic will we release it. So they recognise the problem. Whether this is an adequate solution, I don't know.
Thank you. Wiltshire Fire Service are very stretched. How quickly could they attend a potential fire at the BESS down the tiny, narrow lanes?
Yes, and indeed, this is an issue. I'm sure that they will do their best. The local fire service is mostly retained firefighters, i.e. people who have got other jobs and have to come to the station when they're summoned. Yes, it was interesting. The fire at Cirencester that I mentioned, the fire station is about 2 miles away. They took 50 minutes to arrive. That was because they were sent to the wrong place. So this sort of thing does happen. Everywhere, there's a whole set of regulations developing around these battery storage areas. Like, for instance, there must be at least 2 routes in. So if the wind is in the wrong direction, the fire service can use the other route. But as you said, our roads are very small. There are potential issues, risks there.
Lovely, thank you. Next question. If this goes ahead, is the site then classed as a brownfield site forever, i.e. likely to be built on in the future?
Well, the case being put forward by the developers is that at the end of the 60-year period, there then will be a taking down of all of the infrastructure over a further 2 years. And they think it's possible to return the fields to agricultural use. Now, I don't think anybody believes that. What we know is that the sites of the infrastructure are going to be incredibly damaged by the construction of the project. And what's more, even if they're able to clear away the infrastructure itself, this land is going to be used land. It's going to be brown land. Imagine our planners in 60 years' time having to accommodate perhaps a new town or a new industrial estate. And they're going to look at the map of Wiltshire and say, well, where's the land already been spoiled? Where has it been used? And I think it's pretty obvious that Limedown will be high on their list.
Another question, if this is approved, is there another chance to object, or is that it?
The only chance we have then is some form of judicial review. That would mean taking a case to the courts where the judges might well be able to overrule the decision of the Secretary of State. That is a very expensive process. I think we'd have to be absolutely sure of our grounds that we have a case to make and that we could succeed in the courts. Otherwise, it would be very difficult indeed, I think, to overturn a decision made by the Secretary of State.
Yeah, we absolutely have to be certain that the Planning Inspectorate in the first instance does recommends that it is not approved. I think, and that of course is where all of us come in, because we must use our voice to put in our relevant representations so that they really do a thorough examination next year. So this is in our control. This is what we need to do. It is true, isn't it, Mike, that Seneca, whilst it has now received approval, they are still actually, there isn't a spade in the ground. They haven't even started because there is a lot of questions over the DCO, in particular, I think the battery. So that could take a while, I think.
Yes, I think there are various things that have to be sorted out once the DCO has been awarded. And that often brings in the local authorities. Local authorities are being asked to keep a watching eye on the development and to ensure that things are being regulated. And certainly in terms of battery fires and the risks involved in that, the law feels uncertain. The regulatory system is not like the sorts of things that we're used to. And I think that's raising all sorts of questions about the deliverability of some of these schemes.
Thank you. Somebody mentioned that you didn't hear all the noises, and it's true. I'm sorry, I hadn't pressed the right thing when we shared it. There was one other noise, and that's of this. I think it's the substation. And you also mentioned, Richard, that during the day you've got these cooling fans, but also the battery will be on night and day because that's when it's going to be busy. We have something to say about the noise. Actually, we're just learning a little bit more about the way they have tested them. IGP, did you want to say anything about that before we play it?
Yes, I mean, there's a feeling that the way in which IGP are representing the issues of noise are highly suspect indeed. And we have noise experts now who are looking into this in great detail. And we suspect that the impact of noise from Limedown will be considerably more than the developers are letting on.
And so this, I hope it will work for you.
Not at all quiet.
As Mike said, we have got experts looking into this. One of the things that they said is that the battery is going to sound like an aeroplane taking off. I mean, it sounds absolutely horrendous. We're going to be looking more at that actually, and that will be covered in the talk on the 26th of November in the evening, 6:30. So there's a particular battery specialist, but who will be talking about the safety and also the noise element, because it's pretty hideous. There's another question here. Will there be some sort of light pollution around the fencing at night, security lights, etc.?
Well, they say not. Once the scheme is in operation, then not round the panels, quite possibly round the substations. That's that's the sort of thing they might be more interested in protecting, but because certainly crime in these areas is a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I've heard that actually. Somebody mentioned, it was mentioned glint and glare, but the question is, what is it? Do you explain what glint and glare is?
Yeah, so glint and glare is the lights, the pollution you get from the panels, and glint is a flash of light, and glare is continuous light. There's continuous light, sunlight reflecting from the panels going into the window of your house, for instance, and this is known to have health effects. There is an assessment of this by a company who does all the glint and glare assessments, apparently for the entire country. And they've looked at different houses. There are 1 or 2 places where they have moved panels around to stop glint and glare, but mostly you've got to put up with it. And in particular, they've not had taken much note of the effects of glint and glare if you're walking through the panel areas, and particularly if you're riding, because it's the sort of thing that horses don't like very much, being glinted at by panels. So that's what glint and glare is. Again, if you're concerned about it, say so.
Yeah. And an added bit, will the shiny panels confuse birds from above?
Yes.
They might mistake it for
This
water.
is a known effect of the panels. Yes, it is.
I think we're nearly there with the questions. I'm just checking any others. Have they said where all the workers will be housed during the construction phase? I mean, certainly there's going to be a huge amount of workers coming in. One of the worries about all these extra workers, of course, is the demand on the local doctor's surgery, and they will, need to access all the services. We don't know where the workers are coming from. It's likely they will be shipped in, I believe. Any other question? Oh, there's one more coming. Sorry, it's not very professional. I'm very sorry. Let me just see this. Would it help our cause if Ed Miliband is no longer Secretary of State? Sit. I think it's
all agree with that. Yes,
short
absolutely.
answer. Yeah, exactly. I'd like we're going to just reshare, I think, the word cloud, if that's okay, because this will just help to hopefully you can just see a bit of it there. And we have got that on our website. I think it's all there. Thank you. But that, oh no, it's gone again. This hopefully by just, might just prompt you. Can I remind you that individuals can respond, but also businesses. So if you have a business, you can do too. You can respond on from a business point of view, because the socioeconomic impact is going to be enormous as well. So please do remember to do that. Everybody can, everybody can have a voice. Were there any more questions? If not, I can't see any more coming in just at the moment. I don't think. I'm just going to double check. I think that's probably it, and you've all been amazing. It's a lot to take in. Please know that we will be the website is going to be continually updated. If you're not already registered with Stop Lyme Down, please do consider doing that, because it just means that we can send you updates. By putting in your relevant representation now, you then are able to be part of the examination and give further feedback and questions. You can be at the open hearings, but you don't have to be. So if you want to put in your comments or your relevant representations now, and that's it, that's absolutely fine, because Stop Lyme Down will be representing you, and that's why we've got all these experts. So they will be representing most people here, and so that is, don't feel overwhelmed and think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to be part of an examination. You don't have to be. We're just asking at this stage. We want thousands to respond. We need the Planning Inspectorate to know what we all think about it. This is our opportunity. It is really an opportunity that we are speaking on behalf of our children, our grandchildren. This is wrong on so many levels. So please do make sure that you spread the word and just put in your relevant representation. The last one is just a nice message saying excellent presentation. Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. yeah, as you can see, it's very much David and Goliath, and it's a bit Heath Robinson, but hopefully you've heard most of it, but it will be put up onto the website. So, well, there's lots of lovely emojis. That's it. Thank you. No, sweet. Thank you. It's so lovely of you. It's been quite a marathon, these community meetings, and it's really sad not being able to actually meet you in person, because it's been one of the things that we've really found is just the welcome that we've got in all the villages has been astonishing, and it's been great meeting so many people. But so thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely evening, and hopefully we'll get to meet and chat again soon. But thank you, and good night and goodbye.
Good night.
Right.
I love all these emojis.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. How did they do it?